Thank you, Marcy. Thank you, Gervin. Thank you, all of you, for coming out tonight. This is a random evening when you could have been doing just about anything else, but you chose to come and be part of an event engaged with the Sustainable Development Goals and the world we're trying to build. It is a very complicated time in the world that you chose to be young people in. It seems like every few weeks, there's a new crisis to layer on top of all the crises we're facing, whether it's the ongoing challenges of climate change, whether it be the continued hangovers from the pandemic, whether it be conflicts and instability around the world, whether it be pressures on global inflation or interest rates, worries about where your jobs, where your careers are going to go, whether you can buy a home one day or even pay your rent, what kind of world are you going to grow up in. This is a time of huge pivot and challenge in the world right now, and it's the moment we're living through. At least I hope it's a moment of pivot and not just the new normal that's going to extend for decades to come. But I think we are in a time of change, where the decisions that we take collectively, that you take as citizens, as engaged members of community, will shape the future we're part of. This is a focal point in the world, a moment of significant consequence. And the choices we make now about how we want to look to the future and how we build that future with everyday actions that we take, it goes to individuals, to communities, to governments, to businesses, to stakeholders of all different types. And that's where conversations like these, where people can actually talk about some of the really big issues for which I tell you right now, none of you are going to ask a question that has an easy answer to it. We're going to try and keep our answers short so we can get to as many questions as possible. But let me just say that this act of asking questions, this act of engaging and choosing to be present in the shaping of the future that is going to matter deeply to you, but also to the 10 friends who never would have chose to come here to an event like this tonight. We're all in this together. We all have to try and figure out what the right path is forward, and anchoring ourselves in our values and in the facts and in the path forward that is going to be the best for the largest number of people while protecting the rights and being of 100% of the people is a choice we have to take. But with that, I'm happy to turn it over to my good friend Mia Mottley, Prime Minister of Barbados, to add a few words, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Justin.
Et bien sûr, c'est un événement du Premier ministre du Canada. Alors, il y a de la traduction simultanée. Si vous voulez poser une question en français, vous avez le droit. If you want to choose, ask a question in French, you're more than welcome to. I will answer in French, and there is simultaneous translation. But I think most of it's going to be in English tonight.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Justin, for us coming here and doing the work that we've agreed to do in order to promote the best possible world that we can with the Sustainable Development Goals. I like to just call them development. And Justin has done a wonderful job in contextualizing the world in which we live. The only thing I'll add to that is that it is probably more similar to what your great-grandparents and grandparents lived through 100 years ago, with the exception, however, that we do know better, and we do know how to do better, and we must do better. But we can only do that if we can get as many people on board who begin to say, look, values do matter, and the decisions and the activism that we have does matter, and that let's look at a house that's left unattended will fall down. It's no different with a nation. So unless we have people standing up and ready to do the day-to-day lifting and bringing along others, as he said, there's some who won't come here this evening, but you have to be the conduit now to be able to explain why it matters that there should be zero hunger in this world with so much food around, why it matters that we should work to avoid conflict and especially to build a peace that will come, but the question is when and at what cost, why we should learn from the past and do better. So over to you. We're here to really answer your questions. And I really want to thank George Brown college as well. You have been very instrumental recently in my own country's endeavors to be able to do training in the digital world, in cybersecurity, and being able to create jobs that are global. And our simple tagline at home has been Global Citizens, Bajan Roots. And why? Because we recognize that there are opportunities and a mismatch in jobs globally, and we need to be able to get as many people capable of getting those jobs, but that means preparing them through education. So thank you.
Excellent. All right. So who has the first question for us? Oh, great. We get to go home early.
You know, in cricket they say that nobody likes to be opening batsmen, but in Barbados we've produced the 2 best opening batsmen ever in the history of cricket. So I'm going to encourage people to follow Gordon.
I'm sure there's a hockey analogy in there
Desmond
somewhere. But what I will say is by the end of the hour or the 45 minutes we have together, there's going to be 6 people who won't get their questions answered because we'll be out of time. So you can guarantee to get your question answered if you put out your hand now. There we go, right there. Right here in the front. Yeah, just bring over a mic so we can hear you.
Hi, thank you. Is this?
Yes,
testing?
it's on.
Okay, good. So my question was, how is Canada going to, support people living in the Caribbean through the challenges that we will be facing with climate change?
Well, listen, this is, first of all, Canada is one of the countries that is stepping up significantly around the world with international financing and development. It was part of our Paris commitments, and we've recently doubled our climate financing at Glasgow. We know that we have to help invest around the world to create those reduced emissions, and positive energy solutions are going to lead to sustainability. But more than just sort of sending money, we need to send solutions and innovations. We need to actually change some of the financial architecture. And I'm not going to get into it too much because that's Mia's specialty, and she is extraordinarily eloquent about it. But the reality is, when World War II ended, we created Bretton Woods institutions, international financial institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, and others that were there to help make sure the global economy had the ability to grow and prosper. Well, that was made they were all made in a totally different time, in a totally different context than the context we're in right now. And a successful Smile Island state like Barbados or any of the Caribbean countries that is on the scale as a middle-income country could suddenly get wiped out by a single hurricane and lose all the investments, all their well-being, all their fiscal balance and situation because of an exogenous shock that they had no control over. Well, the world needs to understand that it's not in our interest to have a country that just get wiped out by a hurricane or devastated by a hurricane not able to rebuild and get back on track. And we shouldn't be punishing them if they have to borrow to rebuild and have them, slow down in the very hard work of development they're doing. So a lot of the conversations we're doing is on the international stage. I worked a lot with Andrew Holness over the past few years on financing for development through the UN. And now Mia's got an extraordinary Bridgetown initiative that Canada supports to actually look differently at how we're making sure that there are the resources and the investment in climate vulnerable countries to be able to not just eke through, but to continue to thrive and prosper.
No, I mean, Justin has described it well. This is an extraordinarily difficult time for the world because in the global south, of course, we believe that there are 2 things that matter. This is the the stock of gases that are emitted, but also the flow. And that's where the difficulty comes, because the stock has really been caused by 80% of it by the countries who led in the Industrial Revolution. And that's why we say it is difficult for us to go and borrow, because when you make us borrow for climate adaptation and resilience, then I don't have the space to borrow for education or healthcare. And it can't be a choice of the 2, especially when we're not guilty for bringing the world to this point. So for us, it is a matter of climate justice, first and foremost. Then it is, secondly, a matter of being able to get everyone to understand that you can't separate people from planet. and that we are not a one-issue people. Everybody during the pandemic thought of the pandemic alone, but people still died from other things. People were still threatened by other things. So it's the same thing with the climate crisis. Canada has been a voice for good on these issues, and that's why I'm happy to associate with Justin on it. In fact, I think Canada is now the largest contributor of SDRs, rechanneling of SDRs in the world, taking 48% of the special drawing rights that you've received and agreeing that they should go into the trusts at the institutions. In our own case, there's the new Resilience and Sustainability Trust, which broadens the mandate of the IMF to be able to look at causes and not just symptoms. But the Bridgetown Initiative calls for more. And we say, look, we need to lower and level the cost of debt. We need to review the debt sustainability metrics, because if you put all the money in front of me and I don't have fiscal space because I'm required to bring down my debt steep rather than gentler, and I use the analogy all the time, I can lose weight at £8 a month or £4 a month. What matters is that I lose weight on a sustainable basis. But if I lose it too fast, then the whole body politic literally dissipates or implodes. And that's not what we want, because we will survive the climate, or we will survive one issue and die from something else. So one of the reasons why I enjoy doing these sessions is because we live in a world, regrettably, where everything is reduced to 4 column inches and 30 to 60 seconds. You cannot have mature discussions on complex issues in that period of time. And if there's one thing I want to leave with you here this evening, is that your generation, more than any other, is going to be required to break that mold. Because if you don't, you've been left to a nation or a world in which you have to be exceedingly discerning in being able to determine what is fake and what is real. You're left to a world where conversations that ought to be long and mature are tried to be condensed by those who make money in the media, as they must, in short sound bites. But it doesn't give you the nuance, and it doesn't give you, life doesn't work that way. So that if you are going to help save this planet and create opportunities for your future, for yourself and your family, you're going to have to break that mold, and you're going to have to insist on engagement. With engagement, there's an appreciation for other people's perspectives. With that comes the ability to build peace and to bridge differences. And if you don't do it, the world will be a very inhospitable place within which we're forced to live.
Thank you, Mia. Next question, over this section. Yes.
Firstly, good evening, Prime Minister Trudeau. It's a pleasure to have you here at Georgia Brown. My first question to you is, what advice would you give to students who want to be good leaders, or students who could improve their leadership skills, and why?
Leadership is about empowering others. It's about surrounding yourself with good people that, as leader, your responsibility is getting the very best out of each of them in whatever shared goal you're pursuing, whether you're opening a pet store or trying to clean up a local park or running a G7 economy. You bring around the best people you possibly can and figure out how to give them the tools to deliver on the things that need to be done. But the way to develop that is what happens right now. What are the causes that matter for you, and can you get a few friends or a few colleagues or a few fellow students together to try and impact a difference in the world, create a difference in your school community or your neighborhood? How are you mobilizing people around you to get something done that's going to make things better for others? That's what leadership is. Leadership is service. Leadership is putting yourself there to be able to bring people along. And the way to do that is to understand that if you're leading by trying to boss people around and tell them what they have to do because you have some sort of authority, they might do it because they're scared of you, or they might do it because you're in a position of power over them. But you're not going to get anything accomplished to the level that you could if instead you were to empower, motivate them, and drive them forward. So really being at the heart of how you bring people together and along is at the center of leadership, and I don't find it's talked about nearly enough. Mia?
No, you're absolutely correct, and I would simply add that principles only matter when it's inconvenient to stand by them. And leadership requires, therefore, that there are going to be times when you stand on principle, even if it is inconvenient or unpopular. And at the base of all of that is something very simple that I say all the time: seeing people, hearing people, and feeling people. Because if you don't start off with that, then many of the things that Justin just spoke about will not fall into place. Is there any magic bullet? No. And that's why your ability to see, hear, and feel is important, and your ability to go back to first principles when in moments of doubt.
Beautiful. Question from this side now. Okay, you in the back. Stand up so we can see you for, there we go.
Thanks so much. Greetings, and thank you for here. So, as we know that there are many international students attending post-secondary institutions across Canada, this is a fact of Canada's larger strategy of immigration. Those students are currently facing very challenging circumstances that are having a direct impact on their academic success and overall well-being. These barriers include housing cost, food cost, and increasingly high fees for tuition. These economic strains are further worsening by the scarcity of employment opportunities in Canada. On this question of sustainability, what is the federal government's plan for addressing these barriers and making immigration to Canada successful for international students?
Oh, no, excellent question. Although I will point out that there is a difference between immigration to Canada and international students or refugees or temporary visitors or even temporary workers. There's many different types of ways of coming to Canada and reasons to come to Canada. If you come as a permanent resident, you're on a path to citizenship. If you come as an international student, you may be on a path to citizenship eventually, but primarily you're here to be able to develop career, develop abilities in our outstanding educational institutions, and maybe choose to continue to stay in Canada and contribute to building this society, maybe going back home and bringing some of that knowledge so your country back home can be more successful. And that's why we've always believed in international students as an important part of Canada's ability to have a positive impact on the world. However, over the past few years, the number of international students has grown massively, and we're seeing challenges in communities and schools' ability to properly support them, to properly find them employment, to properly house them in some cases. And we're having a very important conversation about how to do that. Now, immigration is mostly a federal responsibility, but international students have a heavy responsibility of the educational institutions and therefore the provincial governments to manage. And we are having a really important conversation about all those stresses, because whether it's housing or employment, that's one issue, but the mental health crisis we're seeing among so many students in general, but particularly international students, is something that we absolutely have to address. The federal government doesn't deliver healthcare services, or doesn't deliver much in the way of healthcare services except to very specific groups. But the provincial healthcare system is one that needs to be boosted, particularly around mental health, which is why we've put $200 billion on the table over the next 10 years to increase healthcare delivery, including in mental health services. So I very much appreciate your question, and we're going to continue to make sure we are creating opportunities from people around the world to come to our outstanding institutions. but we have to do a better job of supporting them and making sure that they are succeeding in every possible way.
I was having one more question, if I could just ask.
Sure.
It was like till 2025, Canada is having a thing to at least have like 500,000 immigrants, but there is no job opportunities for immigrants who presently are there, or who presently are here. Then how are we gonna provide job opportunities to the people who we are expecting to come?
Actually, there are more job opportunities than there are people to fill. When you go anywhere across the country, you see help wanted signs, you see small communities that can't keep a restaurant open because they can't keep anyone working the hours for it. There is a real challenge that we are having a shortage of a workforce in this country, and that's why we continue to be very ambitious, one of the most ambitious country in the world when it comes to immigration and welcoming people and creating that success. But you're absolutely right. We need to make sure we're getting it right. We need to make sure, I mean, generations ago when people came to Canada, they were able to get jobs, yes, but they were also able to buy homes and build a life and start a career and create pathways to success for their children and grandchildren that are living that today in this glorious diversity of this country. Right now, it's an awful lot harder to have that same kind of success when you come to Canada. And we have to make sure that whether it's building housing, whether it's creating opportunities for people who arrive here with an engineering degree or a medical degree to actually work in the engineering field or the medical field and not drive an Uber, as too many people are. These are things that we are very much working on, and it's one where the federal government has to work with the provincial government, has to work with municipalities and community groups to get that right. We've done a better job on that than most countries around the world, but as you point out, there's a lot more to do. So thank you. Question over here, yes.
Hi, thank you for being here, obviously. I was wondering what advice you two had for young people and students that want to grow sustainability in our own smaller communities here. Thank you.
It starts with the basic things every day. At home I tell people that just saving water, not leaving the tap on while you're brushing your teeth, that's sustainable practices. Being able to ensure that we can be mindful about the things that we do every day, and recycling. I walked in and saw the things. We're at home trying to get a proper recycling program off the ground because it's taken longer than we had hoped for. But in the interim, people are doing it on a voluntary basis, changing how we treat the transport and doing a lot more walking and a lot more healthier things. All of these things go to sustainable practices. But equally, in terms of materials and at the higher level, when you get into different positions, if you can walk with that mindset, just as you walk with a mindset in terms of what is good for you to eat, what is good for wellness, what is good for mental wellness, then that then allows us to be able to have the habit of sustainable living embedded in all of our people.
I absolutely agree with all of that. And it's just a reflection that I often have is, we live in a world that just seems so big. There's so much going on. It's so overwhelming. And in so many ways, we're made to feel powerless as individuals to be able to impact the world around us. But let us remember that the climate challenge we're in right now didn't happen because one person with power decided to flip a switch and, set us down this track. The situation we're in right now is the cumulative impact of millions upon trillions of individual actions by people in their everyday lives, some living in developed countries like Canada, some burning firewood to survive for their family in the developing world, in the global south. These are the challenges that we have, that if millions upon millions of tiny actions got us into this situation, well, millions and millions of thoughtful, deliberate, conscious actions will get us out of it. And we have to understand that Every action does have consequences. We're in a closed system, open to inputs of energy from the sun, but the rest of it is all closed on our planet. So every action impacts everything else, no matter how small. Remembering that, remembering our collective responsibility with everything we do, and making sure we're working hard to keep options open for others so you can make smarter choices, so you know about different choices, and so we're sharing the burden responsibly. These are the things that matter. Sorry, you had something to add?
No. I was just going to give you a saying that we have in Barbados, which is an old saying in dialect, one blow does kill old cow. In other words, one step at a time, one action at a time. And Justin described it brilliantly, because we think that, oh, ours doesn't matter, others matter. Look in the mirror, yours does matter. And if we each have that attitude, then we can save the planet, save biodiversity, and bring better living for all.
Excellent. You, in the back.
First off, good evening. And my question to you is, since you are the Prime Minister and you work towards helping the economy, I just want to know, is there any sort of other things you use to help strengthen the economy other than fossil fuels?
To strengthen the economy?
Yes.
Well, the Canadian economy is strong because of the contributions every day of 40 million Canadians, or all the working age Canadians within that, inventing, creating, building, serving, working in 1,000 or 1,000,000 different ways, contributing to their communities. An economy is the sum total of everything that people do that creates value and impact in the world around them. And fossil fuels are a part, and they've certainly been a central source of energy for the Canadian economy and for the world for the past many, many decades. And as we figure out how to decarbonize as much as possible our energy sources, how we develop more renewables, we're going to continue to create value and growth within the Canadian economy. Indeed, when we talk about whether it's getting back into nuclear, whether it's building more hydro, more solar farms, more wind farms, more renewables, we're creating reliable electricity, reliable energy that's going to power our future. Canada making the decision to go big into the business of building electric batteries for electric vehicles is going to create great jobs for communities across the country, great development of our natural resources in partnership with Indigenous peoples as we create lithium mines that are electric and cleaner, and better processing plants everywhere as we solve the challenges that the world needs as a reliable and trustworthy trading partner where some people are less. So all those things go together to build a strong economy. Thank you for your question. Yes. Let's stand up and they'll come right to you.
Oh. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you, PM Trudeau and PM Mottley. So could you please share your thoughts on how Canada and Barbados could collaborate to promote sustainable development in the Caribbean? I know you said the conversations can't be short. They can't just be bite sizes. So what is the conversation that's going on already, and how can students get involved in that in different projects that are probably taking place back home?
Okay. I think the first thing that you're obviously raising is a question of awareness, and that's why we're doing sessions like this. Because if the people are not aware, they're not going to be mindful to answer the question early in terms of sustainable practices, and they're not going to do it. With respect to that awareness, therefore, we rely on persons like yourselves to help carry the message at all ages and all people at all stages. With respect to Canada and the Caribbean's work together, look, we've been working together on the financial reform. We've been working together on aspects of climate and biodiversity. We're talking about other things that we believe can still help us get some success in not going over the tipping point, because for us in the Caribbean, we need 1.5 to stay alive. And I mean that sincerely. As we speak, we have also issues pertaining to the question of how do we get people to do the right thing internationally and to recognize that debt cannot be the solution for small countries in the Caribbean, because it means excluding our ability to invest in our people when we started from an independence compact that really and truly ought to have had reparations paid for us. When the British, for example, abolished slavery, they compensated slave owners, but they've never compensated the victims of slavery, nor have they ever compensated the countries that have had to sustain those lives. And therefore it makes it more difficult. Canada has worked with us on the financial reform, and it sounds unsexy, but that unlocks so much opportunities for us to be able to plan out our own future. Justin spoke just now about the electric vehicles and the batteries. I'm tired saying that when the lights and cameras are off at the COP summits, where are we getting the supplies from? Our orders are too small for anybody to notice. And if we can get them, we have no capacity to influence prices. So our ability to work with a long-standing partner like Canada and being able to ensure that we can have access to the things that allow us to get to net zero as countries matters, because we don't necessarily have the same industrial capacity in the global south at this point in time. We want to see more of it develop, but I'm also being realistic. In the time frame that we have, we're not going to see that just develop overnight. So working with partners like Canada on how do we do the greening across the board in practical ways and through our trading and investment practices will also make a significant difference beyond the financial reform.
Well said. Yes.
Hi there. Oh,
Stand up and they'll come to you.
hi. Sorry, I have the mic. Sorry about
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay. Well, then I'll come to you next. How'd you get the mic? Did someone back
that.
there
You know
give it
what?
to you?
Someone just gave it to me.
Okay.
They said,
No, I'll point out people so we can be balanced back and forth, but go ahead.
good evening, Prime Minister Mottley. Good evening, Prime Minister Trudeau. I'm a Guyanese-born Canadian, really proud to be here today and loving this conversation. I'm the product of sort of a brain drain. My family moved to Canada because of safety, so I am a proud Caribbean member of the diaspora, but also a very proud Canadian. And really am proud of institutions like George Brown that help promote education, which is really the most important thing that we need to help rise the tides in many countries, and especially Caribbean countries. I wanted to broadly ask what you think that we can all do as the Caribbean diaspora to help support common goals of Canada and Caribbean countries, and then specifically ask about your thoughts on how we can specifically contribute towards sustainable food production and sustainable development when it comes to food.
Well, I just had an outstanding conversation with the president of Guyana, Irfan Ali, who was actually talking directly about that, how we were going to be sharing some of Canada's agri-food technology and innovations as they're developing a significant agricultural and agri-food sector, and we're happy to help. Our Trade Minister Mary Ying just went down on a business mission, a trade mission to Guyana and to other parts of the Caribbean. Went down with 200 different companies and business leaders, and many of them companies interested in developing markets and partnerships in the Caribbean. All of them interested in that, but a significant proportion of them Canadians who trace their origins back to the Caribbean, who have been successful here in building businesses and wanting to actualize those people-to-people ties into business and trade ties. And that's one of the things that I think we have a tremendous advantage on, in that there are deep historical and community connections between our countries. And the world is getting so much more uncertain and so much more challenging in different ways that being able to build together with people with whom there is connection and trust is really, really important. And so much of what Canada wants to grow and develop in terms of creating opportunities around the world, and doing that where countries like Guyana, which is growing rapidly because of this discovery of oil and gas, but also a real understanding of the fact that there are magnificent untouched tropical forests in there and beautiful resources that they definitely don't want to make the same mistakes that the world has made in its rapid industrialization with real consequences. They want to manage it right. And they're looking to Canada. I mean, lots of people are interested, the Saudis, the Chinese, everyone's interested. And they say, okay, but we'd really like more of Canada to come and invest because we know your values, we trust you, you're doing oil and gas at the same time as you're trying to fight climate change. We know that those values are linked. And that makes a really strong grounding to be able to build those business and prosperity connections next. So that's really the exciting thing that we've spent the last 3 days talking about, those kinds of connections and how we can grow those. I look at the nuclear research expertise at the University of West Indies in Jamaica, for example, and say, well, hey, Canada's got nuclear expertise. You're needing power generations. Is there something we can start looking at together? I mean, there's so many things where there are opportunities to grow, but having those connections, like that you embody, is a real advantage and an opportunity that we should be taking advantage of. An advantage we should take advantage of. Yeah, I'm losing my English. Here we go. We'll switch into French now, if you don't mind. Okay, a question in French from you, sir. No, I'm kidding. You can ask in English. Go ahead. Stand up, and I'll come to you after. Just stand up so we can see you. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It's good to see both of you. There's been a lot of talk about individual actions and what we can do to address the climate crisis. But in terms of tangible actions, I know you talked about the Bridgetown initiative, which is very commendable. Thank you for your leadership on that, Prime Minister. Recently, there was a declaration out of the African Climate Summit about pricing carbon in terms of a global carbon taxation regime so that the biggest emitters pay for the damage that their emissions cause. Is that something that Canada would lend its voice to?
Canada's actually been pushing the Global Carbon Pricing Challenge, which is something that we started in Glasgow at COP27, where we recognize, and actually this is not just we as in our government, this is the UN, this is the International Monetary Fund, this is the World Bank, this is significant global institutions who understand that the best way to reduce emissions is to put a price on emissions. If you want less pollution, charge people for the pollution, and they will find ways not to pollute. If you pollute for free, I mean, you think of a factory on a river. If they can just, produce things as cheaply as they can and pour all their effluent into the river, and it flows all downstream, and the city downstream is paying all the costs of cleaning up that river so they can have drinking water, well, the company's making great profits because they don't have to be consequential in what they've emitted. So if you say that company, well, no, you're going to have to make sure that that water is clean, and if it's not clean, you're going to have to pay for what the community is going to have to pay to clean it up. It's a very basic principle. So we did that here in Canada. We put a price on pollution. Now, the best way of putting a price on pollution, the most efficient way of putting a price on pollution is make everyone pay a price on pollution and take the money that they pay, a few extra pennies at the gas pump or in industrial processes, and invest it all into innovative green solutions, so you reward and you accelerate the innovation around climate, so the money that people are paying for the old things pays for investments into the new things. That's the best way that the scientists and the economists all say of doing climate change, climate pricing. That's not what we did in Canada. We put that price on pollution, and then we return it to Canadians. Across the country, 8 out of 10 Canadians in jurisdictions that pay that price on pollution, which excludes provinces like Quebec or BC that have their own carbon pricing schemes and setups, 8 out of 10 citizens across the country get more from the climate action incentive check that just came out this week than they pay on average in extra carbon price at the pump. So what's the point, you might say, if you're just paying back that what you're paying out, getting back what you pay out? Why does that change anything? Well, it changes because we've put a price signal on it, that a company that's investing in new equipment is going to say, well, it makes sense to be more energy efficient so we can use yet less fuel and emit less carbon. So it's worth it to buy a slightly more expensive or innovative scrubber or filter or process that's going to be more efficient because it's not free to pollute anymore. And if your carbon incentive payment that just landed this week is worth $300, but an average family pays about $250 in that same time frame on gas, well, then you've made a benefit of $50. But if that family that was paying $250 decides, you know what, next car we're going to buy is going to be electric because we can afford it, or we're going to re-insulate our home, which is going to cost a little bit more, but it's going to save us significantly more money, well, they get to keep more than $50 of that incentive. So by putting a price signal on pollution, you've actually made a real dollar and cents motivation for everyone, and not everyone can, but everyone to try and see where they can actually avoid that pollution that's a bad thing. And it has worked. Canada is bending the curve on our emissions faster than any other G7 country right now, with just 6 years of carbon pricing, or 7 years of carbon pricing. So, but of course, you hear a few extra pennies at the pump right now. We're like, oh my God, I can't afford to fill up my gas tank right now. Inflation is high. This is terrible. This is why we're having a political debate about it. But by putting a price on pollution, it's the most efficient way of doing it. If you wanted to do it in other ways, you'd have to bring in regulations. You'd have to bring in extra costs in other ways if you actually want to crack down on climate change. And it'll be more expensive, but it won't be felt in the same way. And that's the debate we're having right now. The issue, though, is if we can get, right now we're about 20-25% of the world with a price on pollution. If we can get to 60% of the world on price on pollution, which is the global climate pricing challenge, we actually massively change the trajectory of the world. Now, it's a very different challenge for different parts of the world. The idea for a country that is living in energy poverty right now, that can barely pay to run its electricity grid off of diesel or fuel right now, to put an extra challenge on it, is a really difficult one. But a lot of Western countries, a lot of successful, wealthy countries are realizing that this is the best way to actually spur the kind of innovation and action that is then going to turn around and help countries that need those solutions, don't want to develop those solutions, but need those solutions. I could turn around and say, hey, we found the perfect type of windmill or the perfect type of solar panel that's going to solve Barbados' energy needs. You're going to be like, great, perfect, that's what we want. Although you are doing amazing things on solar panels. I heard just wonderful things in terms of the amounts you're doing. That's what global carbon pricing is all about. That's about making sure that everyone is taking responsibility for the pollution they're contributing to the atmosphere. That's why carbon pricing is so powerful, but it also, and it will continue to be, a debate, because even though it's a powerful way of changing the trajectory, it's also a very visible way of doing it, and right now everything seems very expensive, and that's why we're having continued debates around carbon pricing.
The truth is sometimes you have to pay to succeed, and it's difficult conversation, but if we're going to save the future, and it's the future that matters most to you, then we've got to be able to protect it. I'd like to go even further and to make the point that everything that Justin said was absolutely correct. In our own case, whether it is in terms of we moved from a road tax to a fuel tax at the pump so that persons can control how much they pay by determining how much they drive. We're trying to do the same thing because Barbados is one of the 15 most water scarce countries, and therefore we're trying to get people to understand that they can also control their bills by being able to conserve water as well, and simply changing out into water-saving fixtures in their bathrooms, in their kitchens, etc. These things matter. But I wanted to drive in on one other point. The same way how we accept the principle that we should pay to make it better, especially those whose behavior is causing it in the first place, is the international principle that the Global South has been asking for to be adhered to. And I say it because I feel strongly we are facing double jeopardy. We were the people whose blood, sweat, and tears led to the Industrial Revolution being successful. And we are the people, regrettably, who are on the front line of the worst causes, the worst consequences of the Industrial Revolution. And that is why, for a country like Canada that respects principle and rule of law, we believe that that is easily understood here, but regrettably it's not understood by all. And we'd like more of the G7 countries and the G20 or G21, as you want to call it, to step up to the plate and understand that when we call for moral strategic leadership at a global level, it includes also respecting principles such as this.
It's still the G20. We're up to about 26 countries, but it's still, it's easier to say G20. I promised you the question, and then we'll take one more question from there. And the 6 of you who didn't ask the questions in the beginning, unfortunately, we're out of time. Go ahead. I'll take this, and then I will take someone here. Oh, there you go, right there.
Hello, good morning. So as I did told me, I can ask anything I want. I just want to ask a question. So as you know, as an international student, living in Canada is really hard because everything's expensive, and also we need to find a job, and also finding a job is so hard. I just want to know, what's your advice for the student? They have big dreams, and everyone told them it's not possible, or it's you just have to forget about it. What's your advice? Like, when you was young, when you was 20, and you just say, someday I want to be a Prime Minister, and some people say, oh no, it's not possible. How you find your way, how you give yourself that confidence, so yeah, I can do it.
That's a beautiful question. I'll take your question now too, and then we'll answer both of them together, and that'll be the end. Go ahead, stand up. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. I have a question. Can you tell us about if there are any policies that are implemented in order for businesses to get, officially certified as a B Corp or as a sustainable business? Because there are so many of them that are claiming to be sustainable, but they're not, and they are not getting punished. Yeah, this is the question for both Canada and Caribbean region.
On that question, there are many different certification regimes. Some of them are very good, some of them are not. We are always trying to do work to make sure that the consumers know what they're getting, who is greenwashing, who is not. But the more important, I remember someone asked me a question at one point, but this country, the company's only going green because they think they're going to make money off of it, and they don't really care about the environment. Well, if they're really going green, I don't care what their motivation is. If they're actually doing the kinds of things that are going to be better for the planet, then let them do it. If they can make money off it, great. More people are going to try and do that and do the right things. But yes, we do need to strengthen that regime that makes sure that people know what they're buying and what's doing well. And I answered that question quickly because I very much want to pause on your question. First of all, when I was 20, I did not want to be Prime Minister. I'd seen what my dad went through, and it wasn't something that was at all interesting for me. I wanted to be a teacher, and actually became a teacher. I was a school teacher. That was my way of having an impact on the world, which is why I love to spend so much. I loved spending time with young people, because a good teacher isn't someone who has all the answers, or someone who makes sure that their students are able to find the answers for themselves. And it's all about empowering people. And I think that's what a good politician is all about, figuring out how to empower your citizens to actually be successful. But there's always moments where you doubt your capacities, you doubt your dreams, you doubt your future. And, it's not true that every dream is going to come true. We're going to face moments where everything goes wrong, and we're in a totally different track than we thought we were. And what you have to do, and Mia mentioned this too, you have to dig down to your values and to what matters. You have to try and figure out how to pick yourself up and keep moving forward. You need to make sure that you have good people around you who know you, who care for you, because you've been there to care for them in their difficult times, and they can be there to support you and keep you on track and tell you, yes, you should still push forward, or no, maybe it's time to give up on your dream to do that and try and do something else, because I know that'll be happy. There are no easy answers because there are no easy lives.
Yep. I just want to add to that. You know, recently I found myself trying to explain a lot of things, because more and more being in this role is about understanding life at so many different levels for so many different people. And you live in a world where people do this all the time because they believe that they can reach perfection in how they look. But the pursuit of perfection belongs to the divine. What is human is persistence and perseverance, determination. And that's what Justin is saying. So that there will be times of great doubt. There will be times of great angst. There will be times when you will simply fall flat on your face. It's how you get back up and who helps you to get back up. And that's why that support system in families and communities matter so much. That's why I think we're seeing so much mental illness in the world today, because we've gone too much on an individual path that ignores that it does take a village to raise a child, that it does take a village to sustain a family. And these are the things that matter. I'll leave you with one other thing, especially as a woman. There's a lady who we will celebrate the 100th anniversary of her birth next year on our Independence Day. But she's actually the first black woman to become a member of Congress in the United States of America, and was the first black woman to run for the presidency of the United States, for a presidential nomination in a major political party. Her name is Shirley Chisholm. And she had a very simple premise, because she lived at a time when Jim Crow was real strong. And she said simply, if there's no seat for you at the table, bring a folding chair. So remember that even when people try to tell you that you cannot, that if you believe, like Star Trek, that you can go where no one has gone before, then you stay faithful to that dream. And if at some point you have to modify it, you modify it on your terms.
I don't think I need to add anything to that. Thank you, Mia, for being here tonight. Let's invite back up our two hosts.
Thank you, everyone. Can I just ask one question? And it matters because so much of the questions today, even though we were here on SDGs related to climate, how many people in this room believe that the climate crisis, I don't call it climate change, the climate crisis is real and present today? That's about 95% of the room.
100.
No, I wasn't doing a World Bank one on you. No, thank you. Just a matter of interest. Thank you.